burn our boats, came the order from 16th century Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortés. Having landed in the New World, legend has it that he wanted to drive his troops to victory by eliminating their only chance of escape. Joe Biden is nobody's idea of a swashbuckling adventurer or military leader, but he is adopting a political version of Cortés' gamble. Signs indicate the president is giving up on selling his White House term as a success and betting his re-election campaign on a single message: Donald Trump is bad for America. Make that really, really, really bad. He'll kill democracy and lock up his opponents. Remember Jan. 6 and, oh, he's a convicted felon too. From here to November, that's the sum and substance of what the president and his surrogates will say. It will be the heart of their advertising and get out the vote campaigns, with virtually every dollar going toward defining Trump as the absolute worst person in the world. Gone from the campaign plan, or so diminished it might as well be gone, are any claims of Biden's own accomplishments. Remember his brief effort to sell Bidenomics as a raging success, shelved as a failure, an object of ridicule. How about the claim that Biden tamed inflation, which was 9% when he took office? Debunked as a lie. He inherited 1% inflation, which rose to 9% on his watch. Disasters at the border, then there's the southern border. Upon taking office, Biden rolled back Trump's successful policies, saying they had an incredibly negative impact on the law, international law, as well as on human dignity. But since then, more than 11 million illegal border crossers have entered the United States, an overwhelming influx that has no precedent in American history. So much for law and human dignity. The result is that the incumbent is unable to make the case for his main policies, leaving him little choice except to go all negative, all the time. Thursday's debate will give voters a clear view of Biden's decision and offer Trump a chance to showcase his responses. The dynamic will add a new dimension to what is already a crucial moment in the campaign. Biden, of course, faces the greater peril because he is trailing in national polls as well as most battleground states. The president demanded the early debate to try to reverse the trend and give his party a shot of optimism before the August convention. Yet a major element of the plan is getting shredded, as fellow Dems warn that the campaign still lacks a winning strategy. An example of the blowback comes in an Atlantic magazine piece where writer John Hendrickson identifies the Biden campaign's losing battle. He chronicles aides' constant squabbling with the media, which he likens to a basketball player reflexively and foolishly arguing with referees after every whistle. The problem, he writes, is not just the frequency of the criticism, but the content. He believes it's a dead end for Biden's team to demand that the media stop covering Trump as if he's a normal candidate. Forget the horse race, the polls, and even most of the issues, the White House seems to be saying. Trump must be treated as a threat to America and nothing else. Cozy media backfire. Although some so-called journalists, such as ABC's George Stephanopoulos, have signed on to the effort to delegitimize Trump, it's not likely to be a steady diet for many outlets. After all, Trump's supposed unfitness has been a feature of media coverage for the last 8 years. To results, he's never been stronger politically, and many leftist outlets are sucking wind. Besides, it's tough to argue with a straight face that Trump is a unique threat to democracy when Biden's party is trying to bankrupt him, imprison him, and keep him off election ballots. How is any of that protecting democracy? More broadly, Biden's one-note, negative approach is risky because Americans generally want an optimistic president with a happy warrior disposition. Negative campaigning is an important way to draw contrasts, but is rarely offered as the whole meal. All of which underscores Biden's biggest problem: he doesn't have significant accomplishments he can run on. Most Americans believe he's been a terrible president and is too old for a second term. Just 45% of voters approve of his performance, according to the Real Clear Polit's average of polls taken in the last 2 months. The surveys show an average disapproval of 55.6%, a gap of 15.1 points. And some numbers are still sinking, with a Reuters Ipsos survey showing him with a rock-bottom approval rating of just 36%. That's got defeat written all over it. Worse, there's no popular policy where Biden can plant his flag and say it's an example of what he will do in a second term. Consider that on questions covering 8 major policies, the public gives him lopsided negative ratings on all 8, as tabulated by Real Clear Polits. On the economy, for example, Biden's average approval is just 48%, while his average disapproval is 57.8%. 8%, a negative gap of 17 points. A separate measure of his handling of inflation has him negative 24 points. On immigration, meaning the border, he's negative 27 points. The closest he comes to a positive measure is Ukraine, where he's still negative 13 points. On crime, he's negative 14 points. On the sweeping question of the direction of the country, just 25. 5% approve while 3% disapprove, a gap of 38 points. Deflect. Now you know why Biden is going to train all his energy on Trump. He's reduced to saying to voters, "Don't look at me, look at him." Thursday will be the first big test. Whether it works depends on Biden's energy level and coherence and how Trump responds. Although the two CNN moderators are certain to help Biden, Trump can't overreact and get into a tit-for-tat of nasty insults. But even that won't be sufficient because he also must make a positive case for himself, which would be an effective contrast with Biden. Trump's ultimate challenge is that he still needs to win over a range of Americans, from urban black voters to suburban white women. Polls say he has made inroads in these and other demographics, but the sale is far from final. The election is still up for grabs. That's why I believe Trump's demeanor is almost as important as any zinger or policy comparison. The Dems fear-mongering that he's a dictator in waiting remains a big obstacle in the minds of many people. He can't eliminate that fear in one night, but Trump can use the debate to reduce its power. If he does that, he will win a second or even a third look from some voters and further shrink Biden's chances of victory. In that case, the morning after sounds you hear will be Dems' heads exploding. A common refrain in politics is that 2 weeks is a lifetime, meaning big changes can happen quickly. Joe Biden better hope they do. As he prepares for his debate with Donald Trump next week, the president is mired in a losing streak. He has experienced rough weeks throughout his troubled term, but last week was one of the worst. Amid rock-bottom approval numbers, Biden suffered a major blow with son Hunter Biden's conviction on 3 federal gun felonies in a case brought by the president's Department of Justice. Still looming is a September trial on charges Hunter committed federal tax fraud and evasion. Burdened by what must have been a mix of fury and grief, the president nonetheless had to board Air Force One for the G7 meeting in Italy. It was his second trip to Europe in 10 days, and the wear and tear on the 81-year-old president was obvious. Without First Lady Jill Biden by his side to direct him, he looked more confused than usual and at one point had to be herded back to the group by Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, whom Biden weirdly saluted when they met. Coming just after the White House Juneteenth celebration, where Biden's hands and body stood frozen as people around him clapped and swayed to music, the behavior stoked concern among his peers. G7 insiders talked of him losing focus during discussions, with one saying Biden's condition is the worst he has ever been, according to media reports. "Sleep well, big guy." Another unidentified attendee said Biden's missteps were embarrassing. Then there was the faux pas of French President Emmanuel Macron, who approached Biden on the morning of day 2 and asked, "Sleep well, big guy." Oops. It must have been lost in translation to Macron that Big Guy was Biden's nickname in his family's influence peddling scheme. Finally, the president had a public dust-up with core supporters, the American media, when he scolded a reporter for asking a question that veered off topic. The White House Correspondents Association issued a sharp statement declaring that there are no preconditions regarding question topics and took a slap at the president for not holding more news conferences. The chain of events is not the run-up Biden wanted for the June 27 debate with Trump, an early showdown that Biden demanded. It was a bold bet to try to energize a demoralized party and head off Trump's momentum before the conventions, but the debate now looms as a crucial test of Biden's mental and physical fitness. Television and digital audiences will be enormous, but Biden faces an uphill battle to persuade even half the nation he's ready for 4 more years. An astounding 86% of voters think he's too old for a second term, according to an ABC Ipsos survey. A New York Times poll found that 61% of those who voted for him in 2020 think Biden is just too old to be an effective president. That would seem to be more than trouble enough, yet the president is also dogged by major policy failures. The open southern border is widely seen as a calamity that will take years to resolve. The economy, including inflation, also gets a thumbs down from most Americans, and there is wide belief that Biden's weak leadership is provoking global turmoil. The White House's obsession with imposing coercive cultural and environmental policies also work in Trump's favor. Swing state slivers, although Trump has managed to put some formerly blue states in play, especially Nevada. The overall race remains razor close, with his small leads in the swing states falling within the margin of error. The upshot is that the debate could be pivotal. In a recent interview, Trump made it clear he is not counting on Biden being a mumbling, stumbling wreck at their Atlanta face-off. "They'll juice him up," he told me, speaking of the president's handlers. "He'll be fine. Whatever they gave him for the State of the Union, they'll do it again." He might be right, and at any rate, it's smart not to count on Biden being at his worst. For one thing, the two CNN moderators, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, have relentlessly trashed Trump for 8 years, and it's unlikely they even remember how to be fair. Watch for their attempts to protect Biden by quickly moving to another topic when he stumbles. Citing the clock is a trick left-leaning moderators often use to rescue Dem candidates from a jam. When he's on offense, the president will repeatedly turn to the buzzwords that resonate with the Dems' base: Jan. 6, convicted felon, and democracy, democracy, democracy. Trump will have to answer each charge repeatedly, and his answers are likely to include accusations that Biden is orchestrating the string of prosecutions and civil cases against him. At the same time, Trump can make debate history by honestly saying that indictments by Democrat prosecutors helped make him the nominee. More important than any choice of words, however, will be Trump's demeanor. The best antidote to the left's caricatures of him as a fascist and a buffoon are calm, coherent, and factual responses. Bottom line, he needs to act and sound more like a president than a challenger. On-stage strategizing in that sense, Hunter Biden's conviction poses a tricky terrain. Given that Joe Biden lied in their second debate 4 years ago about the son's laptop being a Russian plant, Trump would be foolish not to cite the fact that the laptop has been authenticated by the Justice Department. But if he goes too far and gloats over the president's son being convicted, Biden could win the sympathy vote. In fact, Trump doesn't need to take many risks. Because he holds the momentum, he can win the debate simply by not losing it. That is his biggest advantage. Biden, meanwhile, has to go for a knockout. Doubts about his fitness and policies give him little room to maneuver, which is why I believe his attacks will aim to reinforce doubts about Trump's character. The risk for Biden is that he gets too hot and begins shouting like an old man telling children to get off his lawn. Abortion is probably the only policy opening Biden can exploit. The overturning of Roe is still working its way through the political bloodstream at the state level, but Dems have scored by emphasizing that a constitutional right has been taken away. As a result, even red states have preserved some rights to abortion. Trump has tried to chart an acceptable compromise by insisting that restrictions always include exceptions for the health and safety of the mother, but he and the GOP are playing defense with nuanced arguments. That's not a good place to be in politics, especially in debates. Look for Biden and his CNN helpers to repeatedly hammer home the point.